It was a typical summer day in the small town of Clearwater. The sun was high, the sky clear, and the lake shimmered like a sheet of glass. The town's children gathered by the water's edge, splashing and laughing, their carefree joy filling the air. Among them was a 16-year-old boy named Lucas, a quiet and thoughtful soul, known for his love of swimming and his gentle nature. He preferred the solitude of the water, where he could clear his mind and escape from the chaos of everyday life. On this particular afternoon, Lucas was floating peacefully on his back, his eyes half closed, enjoying the warmth of the sun. The noise around him faded as he let himself drift deeper into the lake, the rhythmic sounds of the water lapping against his ears. Suddenly, a scream shattered the calm. He snapped his eyes open and looked toward the source of the cry. There, near the dock, a girl was flailing in the water, her arms struggling to stay above the surface. Her blonde hair was tangled and matted, and panic was evident in her wide, terrified eyes. She was sinking fast. Without a second thought, Lucas shot to his feet and dove into the lake. His heart pounded as he swam toward her with everything he had. The water felt colder than it had before, but Lucas didn't notice the chill. All that mattered was reaching her before it was too late. The girl was choking on the water, her movements slow and desperate, and she was barely able to keep her head above the surface. Lucas reached her just in time, grabbing hold of her arm and pulling her towards him with a strength he didn't know he possessed. He could feel her trembling body against his, and the weight of the situation hung heavy in the air. "Hold on," he shouted, though he wasn't sure if she could hear him over the sound of the rushing water. He kicked his legs hard, swimming toward the shore with all his might. His muscles burned, but he didn't stop. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the lake. Lucas carefully lifted her out of the water and onto the grassy bank. She lay there, coughing and gasping for breath, her face pale and terrified. Lucas knelt beside her, his own chest heaving as he caught his breath. For a moment, there was nothing but silence between them. Lucas couldn't help but stare at the girl, who was slowly recovering, her hands clutching the grass beneath her. She turned her head to look at him, her blue eyes wide with a mixture of gratitude and confusion. "Thank you," she whispered hoarsely, still shaken by the experience. Lucas nodded, not trusting himself to speak, his heart still racing in his chest. He could feel a strange connection between them, though he couldn't explain why. The girl took a shaky breath, her fingers brushing against her damp hair as she tried to compose herself. Lucas stood up, ready to leave and let her regain her composure, but just as he turned to go, she called out to him again. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "You saved my life. I don't even know your name." Lucas hesitated for a moment, then turned back toward her. "Lucas," he replied quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. The girl smiled weakly, still trying to catch her breath, and that's when Lucas noticed the faint scar that ran down her cheek, a scar that seemed oddly familiar. But before he could ask anything further, the girl's gaze darted to the lake behind him, her expression suddenly growing more serious. She seemed uneasy, her lips trembling. I'm sorry," she murmured, looking away. "I wasn't supposed to be here." Lucas watched the girl carefully, noting the sudden change in her demeanor. She was no longer the panicked, helpless person he had just rescued. Now, she seemed distant, almost troubled, as if something weighed heavily on her mind. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she repeated, almost to herself, her eyes fixed on the water. She pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, as if trying to protect herself from something. Lucas felt a knot form in his stomach. Something was off. This wasn't just a simple accident. He had seen enough in his short life to recognize when people were hiding something, and right now this girl was hiding something big. But before he could ask, she spoke again. "My name is Emily," she said quietly, still not looking at him. "But that's not important right now." He wanted to press her, to ask what she meant, but something in her voice stopped him. The vulnerability in her words made him hesitate. Maybe, just maybe, she had been through something far more complicated than a simple drowning incident. "Emily, are you okay?" Lucas asked softly, sitting down beside her on the grass. He tried to ignore the sinking feeling in his chest. This wasn't just a typical rescue. There was something else going on, something he couldn't quite put his finger on. Emily's gaze shifted back to him, her blue eyes wide and uncertain. "I'm fine," she said quickly, though her voice betrayed her. "But I need to go. My parents will be looking for me." "Are you sure?" Lucas asked, his concern deepening. "You almost drowned. You shouldn't be alone right now." Emily shook her head, her face contorting slightly in frustration. "I'm not like other people, Lucas. I don't need saving," she muttered under her breath, standing up quickly and brushing the wet grass off her clothes. "I'll be fine. You don't understand." Lucas stood as well, his instincts telling him to press further, to demand answers, but something in her eyes made him stop. He didn't know what it was. Maybe the way she said "you don't understand," or maybe the fear that flickered behind her gaze, but he knew he couldn't push her anymore. "Wait," he called as she began walking toward the path leading away from the lake. She froze for a moment, but didn't turn around. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked again, this time more gently. Emily paused, her shoulders tensing, but then she gave a brief nod. "I'll be fine. But thank you for saving me. I won't forget this." She started walking again, this time faster, as if desperate to put distance between herself and him. Lucas hesitated, torn between wanting to make sure she was okay and respecting her wishes. As he watched her disappear down the path, a strange unease settled over him. Something wasn't right, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was running from something far more dangerous than he realized. The days that followed the rescue were uneventful, but the memory of Emily stayed with Lucas. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that the girl he'd saved wasn't just running from something as simple as fear or shame. He couldn't help but replay their brief conversation in his mind, her words echoing in his thoughts. "I'm not like other people, Lucas. I don't need saving." What had she meant by that? Why had she looked so scared? Then, one afternoon, as Lucas was walking home from school, he saw her again. It was the same park where they had first met, the lake shimmering in the distance. Emily was sitting alone on the bench by the water, staring out at the horizon, her expression distant and troubled. Her hair was now dry, and she seemed to have returned to some semblance of normalcy. But Lucas could tell that something was off. She didn't look like someone who had just narrowly escaped death. She looked like someone trying to outrun it. He approached cautiously, unsure whether she'd want to talk. But as he got closer, Emily turned toward him. Her eyes widened slightly, as if surprised to see him. "Lucas," she said, her voice softer than before. "What are you doing here?" "I could ask you the same thing," he replied, trying to keep his tone light. "This is the place where it all started, right?" She didn't smile. Instead, she sighed and looked down at her hands. "I didn't want to get you involved in this, but I think you have a right to know. You saved my life, and now I'm afraid it's too late to save you." Lucas froze, his heart skipping a beat. "What are you talking about?" Emily stood up slowly, her face serious now, her eyes filled with something Lucas couldn't place, fear, guilt, or something deeper. "The truth is, I wasn't supposed to be here, Lucas. Not just because of the lake, but because of everything. I have to leave soon and you need to stay away from me. There's something about me, something that could put you in danger. Lucas could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up. The calmness in Emily's voice only made the urgency of her words more unsettling. Danger? From what? Emily hesitated for a long moment before speaking again, her voice trembling now. You saved me, Lucas. But now they know. They know I'm still alive. A chill ran down his spine. Who knows? Who are you talking about? She shook her head. I can't explain everything. It's not something that can be fixed or that can go away. They're always watching, always hunting me. At this, Lucas stepped forward, more confused than ever. What do you mean hunting you? Who's hunting you? Emily turned away, her gaze shifting nervously. The people who tried to drown me. They were trying to make sure I was gone. But I survived. And now they'll stop at nothing to finish what they started. She glanced at Lucas, her eyes dark with fear. You've seen me. You've saved me. They'll come for you now, too. Lucas felt his chest tighten. He had saved her, but now he was part of something much bigger than he could have imagined. He felt a surge of protectiveness toward her, but at the same time, a wave of fear was creeping in. I don't care about any of that. I just want to help you, he said, determination creeping into his voice. Emily shook her head urgently. No, you don't understand. There's nothing you can do. They're too powerful. If you stay with me, they'll target you next. She stepped back, her eyes filled with pain. I'm so sorry. Before he could protest, she turned and walked quickly toward the trees lining the park. Lucas tried to call after her, but she didn't stop. She was gone, disappearing into the shadows of the woods, as though she had never been there at all. Lucas stood there, his heart racing, his thoughts a whirlwind. She had said that they would come after him now. But who were they? And why had they wanted to drown her? There was something much darker at play here, something Lucas didn't fully understand. He looked down at the spot where Emily had stood. All that remained was the quiet ripple of the lake, its surface calm and untroubled, as if nothing had ever happened. But for Lucas, everything had changed. The girl he had saved was now a part of a world far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. And the question that haunted him was, would he ever see her again? Or was this the beginning of something far worse than either of them could have prepared for? The end.